Hello and welcome back to the third part of our Beginner's Guide mini-series for Europe Universalis 4, where we are playing as Portugal. In this video, we're likely going to be finishing this first war and kind of talking about how to recover from your first war, deal with all the new land that you hopefully have gained, and then kind of talk about some other systems in the game a little more generally. I'm assuming this will probably be the last video in the series, but if we need another one at the end of this one, we will see, and we might continue it on. Either way, we're going to get started here. At the start, we're mostly just waiting until our siege is completed. Right, we are sieging this down because of the fact that a lot of our allies are also sitting on this province with a lot of troops. We're going to be suffering some attrition. So what I'm going to do is take all of our infantry and move them off of here. I'm going to leave the cavalry, mostly because I don't trust the AI. Sometimes the AI will be a little silly, and they'll move all their troops off, which breaks the progress on the siege. So I'm going to leave some behind, just in case I need to take up the siege again, myself. But right now, most of the heavy lifting is being done by our AI allies, right? Which is great. We have a strong position. If we go to diplomatic map mode, we can see out of all like, we have a lot of power on our side. We have Castile, we have England, we have Aragon, and Naples is actually a personal union partner of Aragon. I talked about this a bit in the first episode, and possibly the second, but if I remember correctly, there are ways to increase your influence and expand your country diplomatically as well as by war. So for instance, with Navarra, who is somewhat close to us, we could offer them vassalization. They wouldn't accept it. But for someone like Castile or Aragon, who are right there next to Navarra, they are probably going to vassalize Navarra at some point in time. Personal unions basically work in the sense that if you are a kingdom and your line runs out, it's possible that one of the people you have a marriage with will take over your throne. And essentially you become a special sort of vassal, like Naples is, called a personal union. It's slightly different than a vassal, but essentially you are under the other country, but still not fully integrated. Vassals you can normally integrate quicker than personal unions. But there are other benefits that I'm not going to get into here. There's a lot of different types of kind of relationships you can have between a vassal and the overlord. So, we have an event here. Again, normally when I look at events, normally I just quickly look at the results and click one and move on. I don't normally read the stuff too much. You can if you want. It's just flavor, right? So losing a stability is very bad. You generally do not want to lose stability. You want to get stability as high as possible. You really never want to go below 0, I would say, if you can avoid it, right? You always want to stay at least 0. 1 is a good spot to be. We could increase it to 1, by the way. It gets more expensive to go up to 2 and then 3. 1 is a good spot to be. 0 is fine. Anything below 0 you really don't want. And obviously the ideal would be 3. But on the other hand, we have corruption and a loss of money. The money would be totally fine. Honestly, we could easily handle it. It's going to put us in a little bit of debt, but that's okay. You can take loans, and lots of times you need to take loans during wartime. It's pretty regular. The corruption is not so bad either. 0.5 corruption at the very least is not that much. Essentially, corruption basically makes everything slightly more expensive. All your power costs. So in other words, this button here, it cost 105 before. I think it was 105 before, and it's still 105. It hasn't rounded up anymore. Buttons like this one as well. Yeah. So like the base cost right now, 0.5 corruption is so little that it's really not even going to affect any of our costs for any of these buttons that cost power points. So in other words, it was a good thing to do that probably, rather than taking the stability. Sure, we lost some money and had to take a little bit of debt on. You can see like our loans down here, our debt. We have a little bit of debt, sure, but at the same time, you have to think about the fact that stability also affects your income, right? The more stability you have, if it'll show, let's see, where do we see that? There we go. right? So the more stability you have, the more tax modifier you have, right? So we, by keeping our tax modifier intact and our other things intact, we are able to make up that money that otherwise we would have. The money that we lost, we basically would have lost it either way, if you kind of think about the opportunity cost of the situation. So, what are we going to do here? Well, we're just waiting for this siege to finish before we move on to other things. So, we have the vassals of Morocco that we could go and siege down, but vassals are kind of a secondary priority. Really what we want to do, if we go to diplomacy screen, we can see all the enemies are fighting. Really, we want to get rid of Clemson. We want Clemson to be out of this war. And so what we could do is, after we are able to, right now we can't actually reach their stuff by land, at least. We could transport by sea. I'll talk about the possibility for that in a second. We can't reach this stuff. Once we get Fez, we'll be able to reach Clemson. And what we can actually do, if you look at the war screen, is you see all of these have some icons, but this red flag icon, what this actually means is that we can separate piece them from the war, piece them out separately. They're no longer part of the war, and then we can focus our efforts fully on Morocco. And so when you're in a war with people, especially if you get declared on, you might not know, but you can always go look at this screen, and if it has a red flag, that means you can piece them out of the war. That can be very important when you're in some defensive wars. Let's say that you were a little too greedy or something, and some people declare on you. If they have red flags next to their allies' names, you might want to focus on those allies first. Go out of your way to attack the allies first. That way the allies get pieced out. They can't reinforce and come back to help. And then you focus on the main person who declared the war. There are some exceptions to being able to do this. For instance, if you have any coalition wars, which right now we don't have any aggressive expansion, but if your aggressive expansion goes above 50 with any country, they will be able to join a coalition against you, and eventually they could declare a coalition war, a punitive war, basically, to contain your aggressive expansion. And with that, if you're declared on in that way, members of the coalition cannot be separate pieced out. So that's one of the reasons why coalition wars are very deadly and can essentially erase any progress you made in the war that led to it. And that's why it's very important to really try to watch that aggressive expansion number. I'll show how that works once we get to the peace deal screen in this one. This is a good event. We can either get diplomatic power, which again is power points, our mana. You could say it's our mana points that you basically use for all your big tech things and everything like that. Very important. And we get some opinion buff. Or we can do mercantilism. Mercantilism basically is just a flat increase to our trade money and trade power, which I'll probably talk about a little bit later this video. I'm going to take the power, though. Anything that gives you power is fairly rare and really good to do if you can. So yeah, you can see that there's this little red horse thing here, and what that is saying is that their war enthusiasm is low. Realistically, what that means is we could get out of the war right now with probably a province. It looks like not any, actually not, but basically they'd be willing to take a peace deal right now. But because our war score is only 6%, it's unlikely that we get anything we really want. England just got their army obliterated. And actually, this gives me a good chance to show why did England's army just get completely destroyed in that battle there. They're gone now, you can't see them. But England had an army there. It got completely wiped out. It didn't retreat. Why is that? Well, the reason why is that if your army gets caught out in the open with low morale and then attacked, it's possible they just get completely wiped. Stack wiped is the term. Why did it happen in this case? In this case, likely it's because England couldn't retreat anywhere. I think England, I didn't see when England did it, but I'm imagining that they transported by sea to get around these forts. And this brings me to what I was going to talk about earlier. You can totally do that. You can transport an army by sea to get around a fort zone. However, the fort zone blocks both ways. So in other words, if you skip to one end of it, you won't be able to retreat back to friendly territory if you get stuck in a bad spot. And so if the AI does this to you, you can abuse it. But if you do it to the AI, they can abuse it. Where, let's say you put an army out past a fort zone of control, and then they get caught in a bad battle. If you retreat, they might retreat to the next province over instead of retreating back to friendly territory. And at that point, they could get completely wiped because they have no one there to, no way to get to friendly territory. So you got to be very careful with stuff like that. Why am I putting my whole army here, by the way, if we're just going to be suffering attrition? It's because they have a lot of troops moving around right now, and I really don't want to present a target here. We've gotten so far into the siege that I'm willing to take a bit of attrition if it means kind of warding off an attack a little longer so that we can finish the siege. This is a very important siege. If we win this siege, we're set. We have a mountain defense spot at that point that we can use to wipe out whatever they throw at us. However, if they break this before I'm able to get it, then we're in a rough spot. We would essentially then have to redo the siege, start from scratch, and now we don't even have as many troops to be able to handle it. Luckily, we got it. So we got this. This siege. What I like to do is wait a couple months. One thing I haven't talked about is that the garrison of your forts is it starts off very low, and then it'll increase every month. We want to wait a couple months before we really leave the fort side, because if it gets sieged when it has a skeleton crew manning it, it can be pretty nasty. More than that, staying next to the fort for a little bit, it can lead to situations like this. Their armies are about to come and try to re-siege it, which is not good, but remember, now that we have control of the fort, we can use it defensively. I'm not going to do this on my own. What I'm hoping is that one of our allies will bring their army over here, and then I can get them to help me. We have a little bit of time till it gets broken down. We have a naval battle going on right now. I'm not worried about that right now. England has gone on to the next fort of a vassal. England does stuff like this, or, you know, the AI in general will do stuff like this, where they do kind of silly things that aren't really going to help end the war. And England pieced out because they have rebels. Wow. That's annoying. But it is what it is, right? Lots of times the AI will kind of screw you over, right? And that's one of the fun things about this game. You really have to start thinking about, is the AI... The AI doesn't care if you win or lose. They only care about themselves, right? They'll help you if it's mutually beneficial, but in the end, you're going to have to look out for yourself. Numero uno, you know? I'm going to take a sip of my drink real quick. This can be kind of helped in some of the... I mentioned in the intro to the series that I will most likely... that I'm going to mention DLC features when it becomes relevant. So one such feature is that some of the DLC makes it so you can set objectives on specific provinces for your allies to focus on. You can have varying levels of success with that, but in general the AI is going to do what the AI wants to do. There are certain things from some of the DLC that you can kind of manipulate it, though. I don't remember which DLC it's from, I apologize. Castile is now arrived, so this is what I was hoping for. This is what I was waiting, right? I didn't want to just go take this battle by myself. I don't even know if I could win, because they do have a numbers advantage. But Castile is now here, and Castile is charging in ahead of me. So, what am I gonna do? Well, you can see that they're gonna arrive on the 26th of March. I want them to take the brunt of the damage. So what am I gonna do? Well, I need to wait 4 days to the 18th of March. And now if I attack, I'm timing it so that my army will arrive a single day after theirs. And we'll watch what this does, right? So they're going to arrive on the 26th. So, we look at this battle now, and Castile's armies have all filled in the front lines fully. Meaning they're the ones taking the damage from this fight. My armies arrive a day later, and now my armies are waiting to fill in gaps that appear in the line, but I'm not taking the damage first. In other words, I'm letting them take the brunt of the opening damage. and then my troops will help out if necessary, which it wasn't. We actually, by the way, if you see how quickly that battle ended, you may realize their army just disappeared. In other words, we killed them so quickly, their morale couldn't even recover, and we totally wiped their army. That can happen in cases where you have really lopsided battles. Either lopsided in number or lopsided in terrain bonuses and other things in this case. So yeah. One thing I haven't mentioned, or I haven't looked at in a little bit, is that we actually have a couple missions done. They'll glow when they're done and ready to be clicked on. So for instance, this one here, where our navy size goes up. We can do that. Might as well. We get some diplomatic power. This one here with trustworthy allies. It gives us diplomatic reputation, which is basically, I haven't really talked about it, but diplomatic reputation basically is just, it makes people like you more, as you can imagine. That's basically it. And yeah. So now that we've got Fez defended, we smashed their army a good bit. We're going to go over here to Clemson, and we're going to try to siege down Clemson's capital. If anything, I don't really care to fight Clemson at all. I don't need to fight them anymore. If I could white peace them out, basically just peace out for no gain, no loss, I would do it right now. However, when we hover this X, we can see 0 demands made, right? They wouldn't accept yet because the length of the war, etc., etc. If the war lasts long enough, or if they get weak enough, or if we just get more land of theirs, then they would be willing to peace out. Right now, I'm not going to be able to. That's okay. We're in a fine spot. We're just going to sit here and wait for stuff to happen. We'll go up to speed 4 in the meanwhile. So this is a good event. Fort defense up or siege ability. Well, we're sieging. Let's do this. This is an event that can happen early on with Aragon relating to Naples. Naples is now free of their rule. And yeah, there's lots of events that you'll sort of get used to seeing. Stuff relating to the Holy Roman Empire, for instance, which has its own unique mechanics. Stuff relating to the 100 Years' War. Stuff relating to the fall of Constantinople, which, as a matter of fact, seems to be going on right now. Yeah. There's lots of events you'll get used to seeing often. And that's one of the things is that every game of EU4 is going to be slightly different, but there are general patterns. For instance, the Ottomans, 98% of the time, probably, will conquer Constantinople and then just become hugely powerful. I've seen once or twice where the AI has managed to hold them off, but it is extremely rare. And if you're playing in that area, good luck, because it is very difficult to survive with the Ottomans knocking on your doorstep, right? Albania, Byzantium, Serbia, even Wallachia, any of these other Turkish minors, super difficult starts. They can be very fun, though. Once you got a bit of practice in the game, they can be very, very fun. Yeah. That event, I took an option for papal influence, which is one thing I haven't talked about as well. Again, I'm not going to be able to cover even half of all the mechanics of this game. The idea is to give you kind of an overview of the stuff that might pop up in your first playthrough, right? So like this papal stuff. What is this papal influence I got? Well, the Pope is over here, right? But we're a Catholic country, and so we can kind of influence the Pope and use our sort of natural religious influence to kind of do some different options. And most of these are basically just one-time bonuses that last for however long, right? It does get interesting once we get to the year 1500-ish. You'll start to have the Protestant Reformation. And the Protestant Reformation, countries that are Catholic can join it, right, and become Protestant. And there's different abilities for Protestants. Later on, there's like a second wave that can happen called Reformed, which is, I think Reformed is supposed to represent like Calvinist schools of thought and stuff a little bit later. And all that is really cool. They all have their own unique abilities that Catholicism doesn't. That's the type of stuff I'm not really going to get into right now because it's not going to become relevant in this campaign, which is a mini campaign, you know. And it's stuff that you're just, it's best to just explore on your own. You know, once it happens the first time, you can decide, do I want to become Protestant? Do I want to stay Catholic? You know, it can be a challenge either way. If you're the first Protestant country, you might get targeted by other countries more. If you try to stay true to Catholicism, especially in an area that's weighted to become Protestant, like Germany, you could you might have an uphill battle trying to keep Catholicism strong there. So this is a good event, either stability or tax and trade modifier for our king. That's really interesting. It actually lasts until the death of our ruler, which he's like 17 or something like that. Let's see, how old is he? 19. You know, the age stuff is basically just a random chance of death on any given tick that gets higher the older your ruler is, right? Most rulers will live to be their 50s or 60s, you know. And honestly, I feel like that's maybe 40 years worth of extra trade and tax, right? And that's stuff you can kind of think about, right? On the other hand, one, stability is a very immediate benefit. I'm going to do the trade and tax, but I think either of those are respectable options. Stability is very hard to come by for free, so this is a good situation that we have here. We're sieging down Clemson's capital. The War of the Roses is finished, okay. We have won the siege of their capital now, and we're about to win this other one at some point in the near future. Okay. So, this is really good. So what do we want to do here? Well, Clemson is ready to be pieced out of this war. We're going to separate piece out the secondary participant of Clemson. Here's the thing. We could take land from them. However, I would recommend, especially in your first campaign, to not really do stuff like this. Taking land from a secondary participant increases the amount of aggressive expansion that you get with other countries by a lot, because they're like, you didn't even declare war on them, but you're taking land from them. They were just an ally, right? Yeah. So remember, this aggressive expansion number here, we can see it here, and this, if we were to take stuff here, it would give us 54 if we took 3 provinces. That would, if you hover over this, it will show you any countries that would be able to join a coalition. If we took these 3 coastal provinces, all it would do would make it so that Clemson, Morocco, and Tunis could join a coalition. And that wouldn't even really matter, because Clemson and Morocco are going to be weaker, and they're going to have a truce with us. Tunis would be able to join, but whatever. So, like, you may look at that and say, oh, that's fine, why don't you do it then? Well, the reason why is because we still haven't even looked at the stuff from the actual peace deal with Morocco. So what we're going to do is we're going to play it safe, and we're not going to take any of the land. What we can do is we can take some other stuff. There's lots of peace treaty options of different types you can do. Really, if you're not going to take land from Cede Province, there's a lot of treaty stuff that's good to do. So we can humiliate them, which gives us power projection, which is just good. We can take money from them. Might as well. We can do transfer trade power, and they aren't willing to accept that. We can like dial it back down from there, right? To where they would accept it, basically. And bam. We piece them out. We're no longer at war with Clemson, now just Morocco. And because Clemson was the only thing really helping Morocco, we now have 99% war score against Morocco. Basically meaning we can just peace out right now for basically anything we want, up to 100% war score. So what are we going to do here? Well, we're going to take Fez, which was our war goal, and we have a claim on. We're going to take Tangiers, which is also a war goal, or also a claim, right? That's 27% war score and 36 aggressive expansion, which is a good amount. But again, aggressive expansion, the way it works, it starts on that country, and then it kind of ripples out and gets weaker as it goes out. In other words, Denmark isn't going to give a crap about what we take from Morocco. Additionally, other factors like religion factor into it. So since we're taking land from a Sunni country, Castile and Aragon and everyone in Catholic Europe is not going to care at all, basically. Whereas Clemson and Tunis are going to care a lot. So yeah, there's a lot of factors to take into consideration with stuff like this. But in general, if you just hover over this number and you don't have any new coalition members, well then you're probably fine. And I might, yeah. So this button or this icon will also appear here if you would get a coalition. right? And you won't always get a coalition if this is here. What it means is they could join a coalition. However, if we took this extra province here that I added, Meknes, that would actually be fine because, well, I mean, it's one country. One country does not a coalition make, right? And it's Morocco, who is going to have a truce with us anyways. So, we're going to do that. We're going to take 3 provinces here, going into the interior of the country a little more. And I'll explain why in a second. But we can also, we have a lot more war score left, so we can humiliate them too. And get some money, you know? Might as well. And there you go, 100% war score. They're totally willing to accept. Let's take it. And our country is now grown a little bigger, right? So yeah, that is, we've completed our first war now. We have some more land. Morocco has been thoroughly beaten in that war. And yeah, we have a truce with them. That lasts, where am I? Here we go, at the top. We have a truce with them that's going to last until 1466. 15 years is a full truce timer. But yeah, we have a lot more land now. So, now that we've finished our first war, what do we need to do to sort of recover from it? Because our manpower, if you notice, is at 0. We had to take loans on and everything. So we're not in a great spot necessarily, but we're also much bigger than we were before. We've got a good chunk of land, right? Well, the first thing you always want to do is you want to make your land core. We have 30% overextension. And again, you can't go over above 100. You get really bad penalties. And we need to start integrating into our land, into our country. The other thing is we're really not getting any benefit. We get 0% of the tax value of this province because it's not a core. The autonomy value, which I haven't really talked about much, we'll talk about it in a little bit. Basically, because it's not a core and not stated, we get basically no benefit from this land. We conquered it all, but we're basically getting no benefit until we make it a core part of our country, which we use the admin power for. And this is where your mana points are extremely powerful, necessary to have. We could reduce our war exhaustion because the war exhaustion slightly affects the cost. But we're just going to hit the core all button, core all this land up. If we look at these provinces, okay, so this is fine, not worried about this. Because we got so much land, Granada is now no longer a valid rival. We've eclipsed them in power. If we look at these provinces, we can see under unrest, they have a lot of unrest. Any amount of positive unrest will essentially start building up a rebellion. And realistically, because of the fact that this is bad. I'll take the tax. Because of the fact that this is this is land of the wrong religion. It's not Catholic, right? And it's also a different culture that we don't have accepted. It's a Moroccan, right? We essentially, there's no way, like, at all, that we would ever be able to prevent a rebellion. So, we're just going to have to wait for it and then fight whatever rebels spawn. You can see rebel factions over here. And you can see that basically it tells you when the next revolt was expected. 3.7 years. So, sometime in the next, 4 years-ish, it's likely to fire. And that is totally fine. The rebel stacks are normally going to be, it tells you how much they're going to be, right? Normally it's not going to be too much unless you just conquered a lot of land from a big country. Yeah, 10,000 rebels in the mountains where we get a bonus against them, totally fine. Not going to be an issue. So while we're kind of sitting here waiting for our cores to finish, which is really the note we'll end this little mini-series on probably, we're going to take a little bit of time here to talk about some other things, some other systems. We've talked about diplomacy, we've talked about warfare, and there's plenty of other things that I can't really cover in this short series, right? We're going to do that. That's good bonuses. There's a lot of other things that I haven't even talked about or touched on, right? For instance, there are these age of there's these age of discovery things, and then these other ages that can happen, and a lot of the features with those are related to DLC. There's also some of the DLC adds like great power features, right? There's lots of DLC things added. I'm not going to be able to talk about those in this video, but there's one or two things left that we will cover here briefly to kind of get you set up. But basically, as long as you kind of get the gist of how to wage war, how to handle what you conquer after a war, and how to run things in between wars, right? For instance, since we don't think the rebels are spawning anytime super soon, we can lower our army maintenance. We can lower our forts maintenance to free stability. Thank you. I haven't talked about estates either. I haven't talked about the estates system at all, but that's because it is not super relevant to the core gameplay loops of the game. Really, I want to focus on the core stuff, right? As long as you can kind of run your country between wars and make it from one war to the next, you're going to be well on your way to being able to play the game at least enough to be able to survive and make progress. And at that point, then you start setting goals for yourself. Like for us, look at this. We got this mission done here where we get claims on all this Moroccan land. Look at that. That sets us up for our next war, right? And so we're starting to get set up more and more, and we're starting to be able to set our own goals, really spec into whatever we want to do, right? If you didn't want to do the route we've been doing, you could have totally just sat there and built up money and, started playing the trade game and stuff, right? But yeah, this is where the point of the series is just to get you to a point where you can make it from one war to the next, and then start figuring other things out on your own, because there's no way to cover everything. So I'm going to delete one of these forts, by the way. So yeah, meanwhile, while we're sitting here, though, I will talk about a little bit more. So, for instance, one thing I kind of glossed over earlier is how do you know how good a province is? Not every province is created equal. For instance, if we go over here to Sauda, I don't know how it's pronounced, and we look at this number here, the development value, it's essentially basically how many, it represents a model of how many people are here, how good is the industry, and how many men can you recruit from it. It's split by three values: base tax, which affects your taxation rate; base production, which is basically affects trade and also just money from production. If you look at your money, you can see you just get production money. And then manpower, which is your manpower, right? And so these three values are on every province, right? And then what you can do is you can measure how good a province is based on how high those numbers are. So for instance, Lisbon, 16 total development with some good tax, some good production, not so great manpower. If we go look at like Madrid, for instance, right? It's even across the board in all these, 15, so one less than our province, right? And that's how you can kind of see that not every province is necessarily going to be equal value, right? So Tetuan is 8, Fez is 13, so Fez is a good bit more valuable than Tetuan, which is one reason we focused Fez, not to mention the fort and other stuff, right? There's also trade. I actually have a separate video I made. It's a little outdated now. But I made separate videos in the past talking about different parts of trade in EU4. The trade system of this game is a really cool system, but also fairly complex. It's not as complex as it looks, but yeah. Essentially, to boil it down very simply, you want to push trade in the directions towards your main part of your country. So for us, we're in the Seville trade node. So we want to push trade on these arrows pointing into our area, right? Again, it's a lot more complex than that. But one important thing is, like, different provinces have these little centers of trade, which are these little 1s and 2s that you can see here. It goes up to 3. Why is this important? Well, beyond just the development value of different provinces, you might also be focused on trade. And then you might look at, well, Are there any good centers of trade in the area I can conquer? For us, Tangiers is a center of trade, so it's good that we conquered it. Maybe for our next war, we'll look and we'll be like, oh, look, Garb here is a center of trade. So is Agadir. So maybe in our next war, we would focus on those two first, as far as conquering them, right? Because they're centers of trade, and we have claims on them. Those ones would be higher priority than other stuff. Let's see. Like, Agadir is not a super developed province, but it's fine. It's not terrible. And also it has the trade center. There are also ways of improving... Oh, here we go. We'll talk about that in a second. There's ways of improving your values. You can actually use some of your points if you ever have extra, if you're ever capped out or whatever. You could actually use it to increase the values of these things, right? Normally, I would only recommend that in very specific situations. Like, again, if you're capped out on points, which is rare. But will happen at times. So, what is this? Castile is calling us to arms in their conquest of Granada. So they're going to try to conquer Granada. If I was really trying to be min-maxy in this little mini-campaign, I would have also attacked Granada. But I don't really care about doing that. If we rushed, maybe we could have. But it's fine. We're just relaxing and trying to, get a feel for the game, right? So Castile is calling us against them. Well, Granada is not really a threat. They're allied to Tunis, whatever. Tunis can't really reach us that easily. They might be able to. They could get access through Clemson, military access. But by sea, they're not going to reach us. Granada is super weak compared to Castile alone, let alone us and Castile. So I'm going to accept. Declining gives you penalties and also breaks your alliance. I want to stay allied to Castile, obviously. They're keeping us safe from, other boys. So we'll accept. And yeah, the good thing is, you don't really have to actually help out much. The AI can kind of just do their own thing a lot of times and be fine without you. I don't know, I'll go siege down this one province. Why not? But yeah, so yeah, so we've talked about development, some of these values here that affect how good a province actually is, right? Which is important. It's important to know that if you have some of these very rural or desert provinces, right? Like down here in the Sahara, basically, right? If you could have 10 of those and have a single province that is worth more somewhere else, right? Like Constantinople, 35 development. Essentially, Constantinople being 35 development means that it's bigger and better than Lisbon and Madrid combined, right? And so that is, it kind of goes to show that you got to be thinking about these sorts of things. It's not just about how big on the map you appear. There's other things to worry about. And then beyond that, there's also other factors, right? We own Fez, Meknes, and Tangier, but none of them are core, and so we're essentially getting no benefit from them yet. It'll be normally about 20 years before you really start reaping the benefits of conquest like this. But of course, that's what you have to do. You conquer stuff, digest it, you could say, and then eventually it works for you and you get benefit from it. Yeah, and that's really the basis of EU4 conquest, right? Like I said, with there's other systems like trade that might influence your decisions. Maybe you conquer certain people quicker than others because you want their trade ports, right? Maybe you want more coastlines that you can build fleets up quicker and become a naval power. Maybe you want to to focus on getting defensive fort positions, right? You can kind of choose how you play that. You can be super aggressive with your wars or not. It's up to you. Speaking of which, we can go look at the coalition map mode now, so I can show you the aggressive expansion value I was talking about. It's normally located under diplomatic and coalition, right? If you look at coalition map mode after finishing a war, you can see a slightly red shade of color on countries that are angry at you, basically. So Clemson has a minus 41. In other words, we have 41 aggressive expansion with them. 45 with Tafalol. 46 with Morocco, 36 with Grenada. And remember, basically, you want to keep that number below 50. If it goes above 50, you're going to have a coalition form, most likely, from anyone who is above 50. And you really don't want that. Basically, just imagine a bunch of other countries ganging up to force you to give all the land back that you just conquered. It'll wipe out, years worth of progress in the game. So yeah, but you can see I have a lot with these guys down here because they are Sunni countries and near each other. But Castile, they don't care. They're allied to me. They don't care about what I do, conquering land. They're also Catholic like I am. They don't care at all about what I conquered. So you gotta take that stuff into consideration. Especially like when you're trying to decide, should I declare my next war? Well, if you wouldn't even be able to take any land due to aggressive expansion constraints, maybe you should wait a little longer. Sorry. For instance, in our current situation, we are not doing great on manpower because that last war wiped out our manpower a bit. And we have a decent amount of aggressive expansion here, so we probably don't want to attack anyone else down here yet. Maybe we could attack someone else, someone somewhere else. But yeah. So the last thing I think we'll talk about here is how, now that our land is all cored here, we finished coring all of our land. And essentially, now that we've cored it, when we go look at the provinces, we actually need to do one more thing, which is we need to make it a state. When you conquer new land, it's on this screen on the province tab. This one. The right one. When you conquer brand new land, it starts out as a territory, and essentially a territory makes it so that you get at most 10% of the benefit because of this autonomy value. In other words, 90% autonomy means we miss out on 90% of the value of tax, of production, of manpower, everything. We want to get more than that. So what we do is we go in here and we turn it from a territory into a state. And then we have to pay a little extra as far as coring fees. But the benefit is that after we do that, if we go look at the same stuff, we are now getting 50% of the benefit. And that will go down as over time. It doesn't go down instantly. Yeah, so it actually was lower, it just wasn't updated. Right? It's actually at 36% in Fez and 46% here, right? And that'll go down over time, down to a minimum. That depends a little bit. And yeah, so yeah, there's a bunch more to this game. For instance, we just got this government reform thing. I'm not going to really worry about explaining that. Most of that is self-explanatory. There is a lot more to this game, though, obviously, and it is a very complex game. But at the same time, the very basic loop of get into a war, conquer land, digest that land, recover, do it again. Focus trade, focus colonization, which we will have not been able to get to in this mini-series. Right? All that sort of stuff is as long as you can do that basic loop and then start setting your own goals for yourself, then you're set. There's a lot more complex systems in the game, and there's a lot of patterns you start to feel out about how most games flow with the turn of history, right? Like who becomes the dominant powers in every area. But that is stuff that you kind of have to just learn just by playing. And I think pretty much I've covered everything I wanted to cover in this mini-series in these 3 videos. As far as the basics of declaring war, what every number means, and all of that. So I'm hoping that that was helpful, and if not, hopefully at least enjoyable. These videos were each about 45 minutes long or so, which is a decent amount. So if you've stuck all the way through, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. I might not see them right away, but lots of times other people might see them and be able to answer them. And yeah, I said this in the first video, but the best way to get into Europa Universalis 4 is to, once you have a sort of basic understanding, just jump in and play, you know? Your first run is probably not going to be super pretty. You might mess up, lose a couple wars, but you'll get a feel for it. And the more you play, the more you'll pick up on, until sooner rather than later, you'll be there conquering the world. So, yeah, hopefully you enjoyed, and please feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel or spread this video if you enjoyed, and I will see you in the future. Good luck.